So today we are back with another Perils in Paradise card review, and today we got some Death Knight cards, including this fancy new legendary. Hopefully today my audio doesn't cut out. Sorry about that yesterday, that was weird. But let's talk about Eliza Goreblade. This is a new 4-mana 4/3 undead pirate. She's Blood and Frost, which definitely going to be a talking point for this card and throughout the video. And she's got Death Rattle for the rest of the game. Your minions have +1 attack, which I actually think is a really sneaky good Death Rattle. I know +1 attack doesn't sound like all that much, but in a class and potentially in a deck that generates a ton of tokens, you're just going to have a lot of little bodies floating around, a lot of little reborn leftovers and your hero power and all these little things that just kind of start adding up over the course of a game, to where this creates a lot of incremental value. And whether that's just, you know, setting up better trades from time to time, because now your rush minions trade up a little better, or just getting like some more chip damage face, or making every little board that much more threatening. I think that's a lot of upside. Now, this is, of course, one of those cards that does want the game to go a little bit longer, probably, just because, you know, you got this full game effect. You might need more time to extract value out of it, because, you know, I would argue the +1 attack, I guess it's nice to end a game if you have like a good board. That could be the difference between lethal and not, but it's not like so decisively big that it's regularly going to be game ending. If you think about, like, I don't know, Crusader Aura or something in Paladin, right? That's a much bigger attack buff for the same sort of cost, so that can be a little bit more like lethal. This, you want more turns probably to get more upside and more value out of this. So it does offer a little bit of extra push as needed in the immediacy, but at the same time can also just kind of whittle people down over time, where I think this is really going to feel best. Now, keep in mind, this can also be played in Warlock. We have the, you know, the tourist for Warlock dipping into Death Knight cards, and we did see the double your Death Rattles card for Warlock. I forget his name already, Dark Marrow or something like that. So, you know, this is something that you could double up this effect with Warlock. We're going to see another card in this video, the Brittlebone Buccaneer, that whenever you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. This is yet another way to potentially get extra hits on this sort of Death Rattle effect. Death Knight also has like the Yodeler and all these other cards. So there are ways to perhaps get, you know, 2 or 3 or more buffs here off of this Death Rattle in both Warlock and in Death Knight, which clearly each additional one is going to offer like even more of that upside, even more lethality, even more grindiness later too. So, you know, I think the potential for shenanigans is there. That said, the more shenanigan-y you get, like the more sort of follow-ups or work you put into this, sometimes it might just be too much work. I think sometimes just slamming this on 4 and just riding the single Death Rattle will be the way to go, because then you're not, you know, investing a bunch of time and resources and turns into this manipulation. You're just kind of playing it out and hoping for the best. Now, as I teased, you know, we are going to get some additional kind of support for this. So let's go ahead and preview Ghouls Knight. This summons 5/1/1 ghouls that attack random enemies. So, you know, if these are 2/1s, suddenly, thanks to Eliza Goreblade, that becomes a more interesting card. We've also just got really sticky stuff like this insane card, the Hound Handler. This is a 2/2 with Rush, so we know we like Rush when we get plus attack, and at least behind a 1/1 with Reborns. That's 2 more bodies, you know, they could potentially get that plus attack. And then we saw the Brittlebone Buccaneer as well that could give Reborn to various cards that are all going to be getting this plus attack, or Eliza herself. So there are definitely some tokeny game plans here. Now, that said, you'll note the lack of an unholy rune on this card and only 1 open slot for a rune on this card, which does, I think, unfortunately make this pretty hard to build with any sort of more dedicated unholy deck. Like, if you want to get unholy in here, you're going to be leaning into rainbow territory, which, I mean, that's fine. We know rainbow can work, certainly sometimes can support necrotic explosion. If you've got a lot of corpses, a lot of bodies, a lot of tokens and stuff, that can be a direction to go with this. But you aren't going to be able to build like a full-in unholy token, like undead swarm style deck with Eliza because of this rune restriction, which was probably by design. Maybe that just got too good. Like, it was just too aggressive, too fast, too scary with all the crazy tokens available to more unholy packages and the various buffs and follow-ups and stuff. So maybe they're trying to narrow you in a little bit, but at the very least, the cards printed this set do still fit. You know, these are all either single unholy or non-typed. I mean, there's a bunch more cards we're going to talk about later in the video as well, but I think these are the ones that synergize specifically well with Eliza. So there is at least a little core or package here. And I mean, obviously Death Knight can still put together plenty of tokeny stuff, even in a rainbow build. And then for Warlock, that's not going to be a problem because all the support cards here fit for Warlock, which when you add this to your Warlock deck, you are going to have to abide by the rune restrictions, but they won't have a problem. And I think they just have, you know, potentially good wide board stuff too. Like this could actually, I think, work rather nicely in Warlock, even if you don't add a ton of support or Death Rattle stuff necessarily. It's just a good card for a deck that goes wide, any kind of zooey aggressive minion based strategy. So all in all, I think Eliza is actually a pretty solid option here. I would say let's just not go too deep into full-on support, just slammer and get that nice little upside for the rest of the game. Moving on here to Ghouls Knight. This is a 4-mana spell, single unholy, so can't go in rainbow, can go in a more unholy deck, of course. And it's going to summon you 5 1/1 ghouls that attack random enemies. And this is, I think, actually kind of good. I've seen mixed reviews on this the last couple hours since this got revealed. I've seen a lot of people calling it worse than like crop rotation, you know. This is 4 1/1 undead with rush that die at the end of the turn, right? This is often comboed with a card that gives them poisonous, so that, you know, you can use it to take some great clears. And I mean, yes, if you're doing that, I think Ghouls Knight's probably a little worse. It's just less reliable, less controlled. Some of them could hit face if you give them poisonous and stuff, and you know, they might be kind of wasted. But it's way better in other scenarios, right? It's actually amazing on an empty board. The crop rotation on an empty board is just complete and utter garbage. You know, they die at the end of the turn. You just summon the 1/1s, they do nothing. Maybe give you some corpses. But Ghouls Knight's amazing on an empty board because these all just go face. Like, you get 5 face damage, and they don't die at the end of the turn. So you're left behind with, you know, 5 1/1 bodies. So I actually think that's really cool. With Eliza, of course, these could do even more damage. This could kind of be a pyroblast on an empty board if you manage to set that up. So I think there's like a nice little boost of lethality in this, and then sometimes it's you know, just a solid board development card too as needed. It's kind of weird in scenarios where your opponent has, like, you know, stats where this is unlikely to cleanly remove minions. In other words, you know, they have like a 3/3 and a 4/4. Like, playing Ghouls Knight into that board is going to be pretty tough, especially without any sort of Eliza buff. Because, you know, it's like, well, I'm probably going to get a, you know, 1 or 2 ghost face, then I don't really clear a minion, and I haven't really done anything. I've just kind of softened up their board. So there are definitely some awkward turns for this, but assuming you're playing from ahead a fair bit, and you still have enough kind of space to make all these things work, or you're able to sort of trade in on your opponent's board, there are some additional upsides here on the Ghouls Knight. So I guess the question for this one is just how clunky it feels in hand when the opponent's board is that kind of awkward shape. And, you know, does it still feel good with the poisonous card that's a little bit more expensive of a combo that I think already got nerfed, right, if I recall. So, like, can you still kind of flex it into that spot in an interesting way? And if not, is this going to be worth it for that potential damage upside? I think in an Eliza deck, this gets the nod and actually looks a little bit better than crop rotation, because it does just offer some unique things. Also, what is up with this slumbering ghoul? The artists went hard on this one. I don't know, you guys might enjoy that too much. So moving on here to the Dread Hound Handler. This card just looks like insanely good to me. Like, it just does so many great things. It's just a pile of stuff for only 2 mana. It's a 2/2 with rush. It's an undead and a pirate, so you got like a couple bonus synergies tacked onto this card there potentially. Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Dreadhound with Reborn. So in total, you get 3 bodies, you get 4/4 in stats, you get rush, you get 3 corpses, you actually technically get 3 different minion types. It's unlikely the beast part of the Dreadhound matters. You know, you have scaling with stat buffs like Eliza across 3 different bodies. Like, this is just a perfect fit for like every deck. I think this card probably just goes in like every Death Knight deck because it just makes way too much sense, and it's untyped too, so you can literally do that. Just put it in every single Death Knight deck. This just feels like a good, like, just run it in everything sort of card. It has, you know, reactivity, it has stickiness, it's fine to just play down, it's good for corpse generation. Like there's no downsides as far as I can tell to this card. The only downside might be that 2/2s on 2 don't trade especially well these days, but they're still fine in many cases. You know, run it into a 1/3 or whatever, you're not mad because you have so many bodies. And then we also have, you know, Warlock, of course. I think Warlock can totally run this just fine. It's great, theoretically, you know, with the Tourist for Warlock. I mean, it's not like the reason you'd run the Tourist necessarily, because an extra 1/1 with Reborn's not like super spicy or anything, but it's fine, it's synergistic. And if you're kind of sticking to a tokeny, you know, Warlocky Death Rattle deck, then the Dreadhound Handler makes a ton of sense in Warlock as well. So this is going to be one of those rare cards that I might just give 5 stars to, because it's just going to be so ubiquitous. It's not like deck defining or the star of any given deck, but it's just probably going to be in every Death Knight deck, and maybe a lot of Warlock decks too, perhaps. So it's really kind of a 4-star card by my scale, but it's like a 4.9 because it's just so freaking good. Moving on here to the Brittlebone Buccaneer, or as we all know her from Battlegrounds, it's Peggy Brittlebone. She's not a legendary named card in this case, just a random pirate, but she's a 2-mana 1/4 undead pirate, Unholy Rune, and reads, whenever you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. And I actually like this card. We've seen a few too many of these kind of setup cards where you have to do the thing and then follow it up with other plays in order to reward that. They've been coming in at that sort of 4 or 5 mana slot, and it's often felt like it was, in my mind, too hard to get a turn together, or perhaps too late to get a turn together. Because if you're playing something for 4 or 5 and then following it up, you know, you might need 7, 8 mana or something in order to pull that turn off. And that's one reason I liked the Warlock Tourist card so much, because it could kind of be played after the fact and still use that Baron Rivendare effect for upside. But with Peggy Brittlebone, we've got a cost here, I think, that's low enough that it's actually still possible to weave this in early and then get that upside all at once and not be spending too much mana. You know, you can have kind of a 5 mana turn where you play this with a couple small things, and there's actually a nice little turn there coming together. So that's, of course, possible in both Warlock with their Death Rattle synergies and in Death Knight. This is a pretty cohesive pairing here, I think, for these classes. Not many of them have actually been this way, where I felt like they were really synced up and designed for each other, but in this case specifically, yeah, I think it fits well in both. I also think at 4 health, this is sometimes okay to just slam on turn 2. It's right on the border there of survivability on turn 2, where I think there's a lot of like 3 damage stuff and 3 damage breakpoints around that stage where this might actually stick. And if it does stick, of course, then you can kind of snowball off of that. That's going to offer some really big, nice early advantages. So I think we'll see this played on turn 2. I know that because I played a little bit of Hunter with the, I don't know, the 1/4 guy that gives you plus attack in Hunter, the chubby guy. The Observer of Myths, and this would stick surprisingly often on turn 2 in recent metas, and I think for the same reason Brittlebone Buccaneer here might do the same. So I actually think this looks like pretty good setup. Moving on here to the Frostbitten Freebooter. This is another Death Rattle card. This one is Frost Runed this time, and a little bit of a different angle, because we're going to see a bit of a freeze package. Freeze Death Knight coming in here. This has Death Rattle freeze 3 random enemies. Any that were already frozen take 5 damage instead. So do keep in mind that can freeze face, which means that this can also sometimes deal 5 damage to face, which is not irrelevant. I think there will be some scenarios where you try to line that up and you use a freeze card, kind of like this one, say the Slippery Slope, where you maybe just like freeze the opponent's face and then trade in your Frostbitten Freebooter to deal like 5 damage to the opponent's face, which occasionally might be the lethal push you need. Sometimes just might be that chip damage because there's only like 2 minions on board anyway or whatever. And I think this becomes kind of intriguing for that reason. Like if this dealt just froze 3 random enemies, it might be a little bit awkward on a Death Rattle sometimes specifically, because you know your opponent can kind of like trade around that or manipulate it in a way where maybe the freezes aren't too punishing to them. But specifically when you have the ability to deal 5 damage with this, sometimes it's just going to stick around and be awkward, or they're going to try to deal with the Frostbitten Freebooter and accidentally sometimes kill off their own stuff that you've kind of had frozen from a previous turn potentially. Now, all that's kind of banked on the fact that you have enough freezes available in Death Knight to like consistently be freezing multiple things on board. And I think there's, you know, let me double check this. There's some, but I don't feel like it's a mountain of different freeze cards. I know we have like the weapon here, you know, the Might of Minithil is kind of a cool way to freeze things. And I will say too, sometimes, you know, freezing things makes it hard for the opponent to trade into the Frostbitten Freebooter or deal with it, or nervous to trade into it because they don't want their things to die. So you got Might of Minithil. We still have Frostworm's Fury, but this might require triple Frost Rune, which seems unlikely to me. We just haven't seen triple decks succeeding much lately in the era of Rainbow. This one, of course, is like the ultimate freeze. Oh, I forgot about Quartzite Crusher, but I don't really know if this one will line up all that well. This is a very good weapon, of course, but I feel like I'm often like freezing face with this one, which doesn't freeze minions, which makes it maybe a little bit harder to kind of stick all the various aspects of the Frostbitten Freebooter. But there are also 2 Freebooters, and of course we just saw the teased Slippery Slope as well. So I don't know, man. There's definitely some options, but to me that doesn't feel like it's a critical mass stage yet. I feel like this needs more support at a future expansion to really get me enough freeze stuff there to commit to this package, because you're just not always going to have access to all of those things in hand at once, and any given one of these isolated on their own doesn't feel as good. If you look closely, we got the Snow Shredder. This one does work with any given freeze, but the Slippery Slope also wants you to have lots of things frozen because you're drawing a card for each frozen character. So you do need to kind of like commit and lean in to make each of these feel really good. And I'm just not sure that's there right now. So this card looks okay to me, but I think it definitely still needs some help. Moving on to the Snow Shredder. This is a 4-mana 4/4 undead, and it costs 1 if a character is frozen, which, yeah, I mean, cheesing in a 1-mana 4/4 is definitely good, but again, how quickly are you assembling the freezes and how early are you playing them? Because, you know, if you're relying on your like 3-drop dying maybe on like turn 4 or whatever, cheating out a 1-mana 4/4 on turn 4 is still fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not like the home run, you know. Sometimes you want to get this down like turn 1 or 2 and really start snowballing off the back of those 4/4s if you want to turn it into a big game advantage. And we do also now have the Slippery Slope as well, which is 2 mana, so there's kind of like a 3-mana turn here or whatever. I don't know. I think you want to save this until you're getting, you know, more things. I don't think you're excited about, you know, freezing and just drawing 1. It's okay, but you really want that upside for saving this for later. So I don't think this is a good way to cheese your Snow Shredder into play. So basically, to me, it looks like the Snow Shredder is a card that's coming down like turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 later, and it's kind of complementing a board instead of like really swinging you early, which I feel like might be too late to make the impact it needs. Maybe if it, you know, was a little bigger, had rush, something else that kind of gave it some extra oomph. But as it stands currently, I don't think this really adds to that game plan enough. Oh, and by the way, I don't think these frozen cards make much sense in Warlock at all. So kind of ignoring Warlock for these. I just don't see the class running these much, if any. So then we got Slippery Slope. This one's the double Frost Rune, which could be a problem for this card. You know, you really have to commit to a like Frost game plan for this one. This is not gonna weave into a Rainbow deck necessarily. You're really leaning in hard. 2 mana Frost, freeze a character, draw a card for each frozen character. So I mean, yes, sometimes this could be like crazy efficient card draw. You know, we've seen a few things here, freezing 3 characters. This becomes, you know, 2 mana, draw 3. That's already really good. And then, you know, you got like Frostworm's Furies or whatever. Sometimes this could be 2 mana, draw 7 or something. You know, theoretically even more, which is completely insane. But again, it does require, you know, really specific deck commitment. Probably some late game energy or mana commitments. Oh my god, I slipped into Marvel Snap for a second. Some mana commitments in the late game. You know, you're gonna have to spend mana to get all these freezes active. So this is not something that's weaving in early. It's kind of bailing you out late. And I think sometimes having super conditional card draw is risky, because sometimes you need to play the card draw to find the thing that you need, like the Frostworm's Fury or whatever. And this directionally is kind of backwards. This rewards you for having the stuff that you like. It doesn't bail you out from finding the things you need. So I don't know. Again, just a little clunky and overly situational, perhaps, in a pretty committed deck. Those are all things that are making this challenging. Although I do love the storytelling between these 2 cards, right? He's shredding and then he fell, which is funny. And then finally here we have a new location for Death Knight. This is Horizon's Edge. 4 mana, 5 durability, which is kind of crazy. And this deals 3 damage, randomly split among all enemies. After a friendly minion dies, reopen this. So This is sort of, you know, multiple arcane missiles stuck together on a stick, and this can deal 15 damage for only 4 mana, which sounds intriguing, but I don't really think that's going to happen all that often, or even if it does, maybe feel all that good, because the reopening of this requires a friendly minion to die, which is weirdly hard to orchestrate in scenarios where you want this to be good. In other words, well, number one, like, it doesn't actually work all that well with Ghouls Knight, because these are all going to die at once, and you can't weave in the button press between each death, because, you know, if there's like if these are trading in on board or whatever, that doesn't work well. So you do need like rush minions. So you could maybe use this like we talked about before with, you know, crop rotation, summon 4 rush minions and kind of press the button in between each one trading in. But sadly, if you have a lot of stuff to trade in to kill off those minions, what's going to happen is sometimes the Horizon's Edge is gonna clear off the things that you would have otherwise traded into. It's like you can't like line up a board of 1/1s and ensure that all of this goes face, for instance, to deal like 15 to face. It's gonna start chipping away at the board that you're trading into a little bit, which is gonna maybe make things a little awkward. They are in increments of 1s, that sometimes helps math in some ways. It's not like you're chunking damage unnecessarily. But it's still just going to be weird. So it's like, it's really hard to get 15 to face all at once. You're going to have to weave this in over multiple turns. And if you're weaving this in over multiple turns, then I don't think the 3 damage really goes very far. It's not particularly decisive or particularly useful. It's just kind of like little pings off of stuff here and there. So I don't know. It's like when you look at this from a raw output standpoint, you go, ooh, 15 for 4. That's so crazy. But really, it's more like, okay, here's like 6 damage randomly, and it like did a couple points of face damage and chipped away a couple minions, and then like, you know, a turn later, it's another 3. I will say, you know, it's probably reliably going to be happening like, you know, in successive turns. You won't likely have gaps because you're going to be able to reopen this, you know, all the time as a friendly minion dies. So you could hope to say like, I'm going to play this on turn 4, and then over the next 3 turns, does this sort of additional 15 damage give me the edge necessary to sort of whittle down the opponent's health or board? I'm not actually convinced that it does. I think in many cases you'd just be better off playing a big 4-drop that does, you know, commit to board or demand an answer from the opponent a little more. I think sometimes this is going to be hard to feel like weaving in meaningful button presses and just weaving in the card itself at 4. It feels clunky to me. So I don't know. I'm not actually very high on the Horizon's Edge here. I think this might have some problems. So all that said, let's rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Eliza Goreblade is a 4-star card. Ghouls Knight is a 4-star card. Dreadhound Handler is a 5-star card, I guess. Brittlebone Buccaneer is a 4-star card. Frostbitten Freebooter is a 3-star card. Snow Shredder is a 2-star card. Slippery Slope is a 3-star card. Horizon's Edge is a 2-star card. Yeah, and that's the Death Knight set. I will issue a little reminder that we did see a couple Death Knight cards previously when the expansion first got revealed, just to kind of rehash on these. I was shocked how little buttons the other legendary synergized with any of this. The Shaman Tourist here, draw a spell of each spell school. There was nothing to support buttons printed in this set. I mean, technically, I guess, was there actually even a, yeah, I mean, the one spell was Frost, surely, right? Yeah, Slippery Slope, but no, like, other spell schools or anything. So I wonder if this means Shaman is going to get some real, like, spell school commitment here, because buttons otherwise has basically nothing extra to work with from this set. Because if Shaman doesn't get, you know, like, some nature spells or fire spells or something, buttons is probably just going to draw, like, Frost and Shadow. That's it for Death Knight. So they better get some way to add some other spell schools to your deck. And remember, you know, buttons only works for Perils and Paradise cards. So we have like this set and I guess presumably the mini set to get buttons some support, because otherwise he got nothing. And then also there was Corpsicle, which, I mean, this is just good with anything generating corpses. So all these little tokeny cards seem fine for this. But ultimately, yeah, that's the Death Knight set. So share your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.